People of Reddit are new celebrities before they were famous. How different do they act now? I live in the town where Dolly Parton grew up, and practically everyone above the age of 50 who grew up here claims to either be a distant relative of Dolly's, or they claim to know her in some way. Everyone has their story of the time they met Dolly. It's pretty obvious, but regardless of who you talk to, Dolly has always been sweet and generous, but everything has simply grown exponentially due to her fame. Examples are the millions of books she gives out for free to children around the globe each month, or how she gave out $10,000 cash to many of my close friends after their houses burned in a fire a couple years back. Thousands of people are employed here and work for one of the businesses she owns, and it's a tad strange to see when you walk in, but the birthing center at the local hospital is funded by and named after her. I honestly can't think of one person I know who doesn't like her. Dolly's heart has only gotten bigger because of fame. My grandmother worked at Dollywood for many years and met Dolly a handful of times. When she died, Dolly sent 24 or so roses to the funeral home. She's a real gem. I went to school with Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley from Harry Potter. I was into acting too, so we had done a few school plays together. He was really nice, very chill, a good laugh. I haven't seen him since school days, but he kept coming to Cleese whenever he wasn't filming, was always happy to chat about the movies. Sometimes he'd need a little break from so many people wanting to talk, and would come and hang out in the library, and honestly, you'd never know he was in the biggest film series at the time. Honestly, I think a lot of these answers boil down to if they want fame or not. Rupert loved what he was doing, but didn't care about being famous and having people kiss his ass. Just a nice normal kid. He used to live in a town not too far from me. Everyone seemed to think he was a recluse and a bit of a moody prick, but I think, like you said, it can be tiring having people come up to you all the time, and he probably reasonably wanted some quiet for himself. When I was really young, I'd go the reptile park, originally owned by Bob Iwin, and passed on to his son Steve. Steve was always nice, would do all the lizard and croc shows, would hang out and chat afterwards. My dad would take me there occasionally, and Steve would seem to remember us, treated everyone like an old buddy. This was before he became famous, obviously, and the small reptile park became the Australia Zoo. In my final year of high school, I got in the zoo for work experience, and they let me stay on. Steve was rarely there, and when he was, he'd avoid guests because they would swarm him and he'd get nothing done. But when I did run into him, he was always super nice and still acted like that old friend. Didn't say crikey nearly as much as you'd think. That's definitely something Aussies say, but he really played that up for the cameras as his catchphrase. Unfortunately, he died later that year, so right up till the end he was just a lovely person. Edit. Getting a lot of similar questions and comments. Who won? No, I'm not from Beerwah. I had to travel 45 minutes each day to get to the zoo. It was worth it. 2. Aussies do say crikey. I think it's more of a Queensland thing, and usually said by older generations. 3. Stev's dad Bob is an awesome dude too, who I also had the pleasure of meeting outside the zoo. Fun story. First time I ran into Steve, while working there, he was holding 2 coconut halves up to his chest like a bra, and sheepishly put them behind his back when I walked into the staff area as the others around him burst out laughing. It was some joke, I forget what it was. I just walked in at a very awkward moment. In typical Aussie fashion, he was there to do his job that he wanted to do, which was to be with the animals, not piss farting around with the visitors, having his time wasted. I imagine with filming, international travel and prioritizing family left him little precious time for the park. So what time he got he took, and presumably wouldn't want to waste a minute. My mom used to ride the bus to work in downtown Cleveland with Steve Harvey's first wife. Apparently she supported him while he was trying to get his career started, and then basically, as soon as he got successful, he divorced her for a younger woman. My mom always hated him because she felt that he treated his first wife like chiz and always yells "dastard" at the TV when he pops up. Edit. Thanks for the gold. I told my mom that the internet likes her and hates Steve Harvey, so you've made her day. I've never heard a story about Steve Harvey that makes him seem like even a slightly good person. A friend of mine is buddies with Paul Rudd. Says he's exactly the same and a great human. Exactly the same, because he hasn't aged at all in like 20 years. My grandpa, RIP, owned a grocery store in Miami in the late 70s. Wesley Snipes and his friends once stole some candy from his store, and when he caught them, he let them have it. Since then Wesley and his friends were regulars. Once, Wesley left his bike in front of the store, and it got stolen. Was a pretty bad area. My grandpa gave him his old bike that he kept in the back of the store. My uncle took over in 2001 when my grandpa died. In 2007 he came back to the store while my uncle and cousin were there to ask about my grandpa. My uncle said they talked for a little over an hour about how my grandpa treated him like a son. When he found out my grandpa passed, he felt guilty he didn't visit sooner. He embraced my uncle and cousin and left. My uncle said he told him they plan on having the building repainted while they talked. About a week later a crew of painters arrived and told my uncle they were already paid to have the building repainted. Such a genuine dude. Edit. Sorry I haven't been able to reply to everyone, but thank you guys so much for love. Even though has often portrayed negatively, glad to see that people still try to find the best in us, even it's a small gesture. This is awesome. You hear so much about how disconnected he is and just smokes a ton, but it's nice to hear he remembers those who helped him in the past. Jack Black is the same person he was as a teenager, funny, kind, caring, and spreading that joy of music. Fun fact, Jack Black used to put wires up his sleeves when he was a kid in the hopes that other kids would notice them poking out and think he was bionic. I put wires up my sleeve and I wanted the wires just to peek out a little bit so that if any kids noticed my wires I would say, "It's nothing, it's nothing." They would think I was bionic because my logic was that I was trying to hide my bionics from them. What guy? Not personally, but everyone in my town has a Dave Chappelle story. I worked with a guy who said he knew him. I called BS. We then met Dave, and they were actually friends. Basically no one in town thought he would be much. Now he is a local hero, really down to earth. You literally see this man just chilling in the park in normal cheap clothes. Nothing has changed him. You wouldn't think he was famous. Maybe homeless but not famous. Edit. I should have said wrinkled clothes, like he fell asleep then just woke up and left. I didn't see any logos and brands. People seem upset I said cheap clothes. I have no clue as to what he was wearing. Still super nice guy. You wouldn't think he was famous. I love Dave's comedy, but what I love even more is that he seems to be a great guy underneath it all. Like that time a couple was scammed for their tickets, and he came and greeted them and gave them new tickets for free. Also he doesn't give a chiz about what anyone says, like ever, except for when someone is being nice. My grandfather taught Jack Nicholson in high school math class. Said he was rebellious, but wasn't too bad at math. Maths teachers care more about the numbers than the rebellion. A close family friend was best friends with Tom Cruise before he got famous. I didn't believe her, and she showed me pictures they have taken together, like a Vegas road trip, camping, etc. He was really awesome, but as soon as he got an ounce of fame it went to his head, and he became very arrogant and a fame whore. Don't forget a cultist. I had a friend in high school whose cousin is Kendrick Lamar. He said Kendrick's pretty much still the same guy, acts the same around friends and family, just with millions of dollars now. I'd totally believe that. Allegedly he visits his old high school all the time to the point where it's normal to see Kendrick in the halls. Mike Walker's dad grew up with Queen Latifah in North Jersey. His whole family loves her because they were about to lose their house, so she paid it off for them. Thief never said a bad thing about her. Queen Latifah, if this gets back to you, thanks for what you did for your friends in NJ. Phil's a really cool guy. Close bracket. People laugh when I tell them she's my #1 celebrity crush. My wife is a very petite Caucasian blonde and she always jokes that I went the exact opposite direction. My aunt was best friends with Madonna in high school, stayed friends until she got famous, and she turned into a completely different person in the worst way possible. So you'll say your aunt knew her pre-Madonna and pre-Primadonna Madonna? I can't remember before my aunt was famous. Alex Kingston played River Song in Doctor Who, but I remember going to her wedding and meeting Matt Smith, who played the Doctor in Doctor Who, and him fixing my flip-flop. The best moment of my life ever. You're Alex Kingston's niece/nephew? That's awesome. I've never seen her in a role in which I didn't instantly love her ever since her, and I was very excited when I learned she'd be River Song, because I knew she'd make things interesting. Wonderful actress, and one of my favorites. I had a teacher who taught Drake. Apparently he was a nice kid, but then got really douchy when he started getting famous. Like, Drake famous or Degray famous? Did the douchery start in his late or early teens? This is one of those threads I wish I could tell the serious ones and the trolls apart. I was once best friends with Elvis until he got famous. He still visits me from time to time. Tyler the Creator. Exactly the same. We were all concerned at how bizarre he was. He would call people a table or something incredibly random, and the sense of humor caught on in my high school. The fame did nothing. He's still strange and a sweetheart. I can almost hear this in a table in his deeper voice followed by his goofy laugh edit. Spelling is hard. My dad was good friends with Will Smith before the Fresh Prince days. Will actually showed him the pilot before it aired. Fast forward however many years to After Earth, and Will invited us on the set. His first words when he saw my dad 10 plus years later was "The Philly crew is back. Both Will and Jaden are the sweetest people you'll ever meet." Edit. Thanks for all the love. This is the most upvotes I've ever gotten. #internetfame. Edit 2. My dad also did all of the work on Will Smith's and Jazzy Jeff's cars back in the day. Had a little too much fun in Will's Jeep and flipped it on its roof. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. My client had dinner with Will Smith at a restaurant in Charleston, SC, and said he was a riot. Said they were laughing loudly throughout dinner. An older woman and her guest walked over when she was leaving and said she did not know whether to be pissed off or grab a chair and join them. Then Will turned around and she about died. After dinner Will went out and talked a rickshaw guy into letting him on the bike, and he took tourists for a ride. Lol. He seems like an awesome person. Bruno Mars' mom was a bartender at a local karaoke dive bar that I was a regular at. At the time, his biggest hit was The Hook for Billionaire by Travie McCoy. Anyway, she was selling tickets for an upcoming concert he was having, and she asked our table if we wanted to buy some. My friend declined, and she exclaimed, "Why not? He's my son." I ended up getting a couple of tickets despite not knowing any of Bruno Mars songs. It turned out to be one of the best concerts I've ever been to. The guy knows how to put on a good live show. The tickets were only $40 each, I think. His opening act was a local group of large Polynesian men singing Motown who went by the name Nesian 9. They were pretty good too. The next time he was in town for a concert, he had blown up, and the tickets were going for $400. I would have loved to see him again, but not at that price. His mom was really nice, down to earth, and a pretty good singer herself. R.I.P. Bernie. At least she lived long enough to see her son's success. The whole family sings. I went to school with his sister Presley, and I remember wondering what she's up to. Found out her and the sisters of the fam started a girl group. I probably looked this up 5+ years ago, so IDK what she's doing now though. Went to middle school with Megan Fox for a bit. She rode my bus and she mostly kept to herself. Most of the guys would fight over who was going to sit next to her, but she was very shy and didn't really have much to say. I'm glad we are finally getting around to apologizing as a society for the way we treated her. She always seemed like a girl whose looks just entirely doomed her to never be taken seriously, even though she's actually pretty smart and really funny. Her new girl stint was phenomenal. She was either super sexualized or trailer trash here on Reddit, and learning more about how badly Hollywood treated her after she stood up to Michael Bay's insanity makes me so angry. She deserved better. My mom knew Seal as far back as when he was still trying to be an architect, and she says he was always really nice. They didn't stay in touch, she moved away, and they were never close, but she said he went out of his way to foster genuine connections to people before and after his music started to gain traction. He always had star quality. Everyone from the most important person in the room to a janitor walking through would be drawn to him, and he'd engage with everyone in a way that really stuck. She always mentions that he was just a really sincere, deeply felt person. So I was working as an audience usher for a certain music competition show a few years ago that for contractual reasons will remain nameless, and Seal was a judge for that season. In between breaks, a girl with an intellectual disability ran to the bathroom, and when she came back I had to escort her back to her seat. The path to her seat ran right past where he was sitting, and foolish me didn't anticipate to walk between the two when escorting the girl. Well, of course this girl makes a beeline for Seal with a squeal of delight that the entire audience heard. I literally saw my career flash before my eyes, but before it had a chance to play out, and I had a chance to get the girl away, Seal had already said hello, welcomed her in the gentlest possible way, asked her how she was, and finally gave her a big hug before she went and sat down. He handled like a true gentleman. I went to college with jokey Ariaka Steve Harrington in Stranger Things. He was my college boyfriend's sweet mate and just the nicest guy. His hair has always been dreamy and amazing. Last time I saw him was at a viewing of The Hateful Eight after we graduated, and he still made a point to come over and say hi. Edit. Spelling. Obviously we can't know a person's true nature from their screen presence, but I admit that I would have been shocked to hear that jokey Ari was some kind of a hole. I went to junior high with Norah Jones. She was the most sincere and serene person. She was fun to talk to, and she never gave a hint of who her father was. The night she won all those Grammys was very telling that she hadn't changed a bit. I believe this. I've met her twice after her shows, and she was super nice and took pictures and signed autographs. Once she had a little dog with her. I didn't expect someone as famous as Norah Jones to actually come out and meet fans after her show, but she did. My mom is friends with Johnny Knoxville's cousin. She met him once and had no idea who he was. She said he was nice and funny as all hell. She didn't realize until years later she'd even met him until I showed her one of his movies. From what I gather, he's a normal dude and pretty hilarious. Removed. I know this is not what the question is asking, it's sort of the other way around. Have you met a famous person who is as nice as people say? But as it's about Tom Hanks, it has to be told. My cousin worked at Illegal Chambers in London, and they were told a film crew were coming in to use it for a few weeks. They were told, don't engage with the actors, just go about your business. The film The Da Vinci Code, and, as per above spoilers, Tom Hanks was in it. For a day or three, they all did as they were told, kept their heads down, until eventually Tom Hanks came and knocked on their lunchroom door, basically just said "Sus for messing up where you work, can I join you for lunch?" And then it was on. Every day, breakfast and lunch, where time permitted, Tom Hanks was hanging out with these guys like he was a new employee, reading the newspaper, making cups of tea, getting in the bacon rolls, or whatever, calling people's family members to say hi, it's Tom Hanks, for a laugh just to see this reaction. Basically, after a couple of weeks, was just like one of the team. Everyone on first name terms, just genuinely nice. Last day he made sure to say bye to everyone. He brought them all some kind of gift. I can't remember what, but it was really low-key, inexpensive, but personal, which was a nice touch. Just really wholesome time for everyone. People say Tom Hanks is an absolute lad, and it transpires he is. I really thought this was going to be something bad about him, and didn't want to read. I'm so glad I did. T. Hanks. My grandmother and mum were really good friends with George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley from Wham. They got invited to concerts and got to sit in special seats, etc. And a few years ago me and my family stayed with Andrew Ridgeley in his guest house in Cornwall for a weekend. But they seemed to me like they stayed really nice to my grandparents and mum. And Andrew Ridgeley was very kind to my family when we met him. I miss George so much. I wish he would have been the one to do the reunion tour with Queen. His version of Somebody to Love is spot on. Friend of mine was friends with Tom Hanks in high school and went to prom with him. He still writes her personalized day cards on one of his typewriters. I hope one day I'll be so rich and successful that I can afford multiple typewriters. Family friend of mine actually dated Kurt Cobain before Ms. Love. Apparently they broke up because he wouldn't get a job, then a little while later he got famous. Can't finish the question for obvious reasons. I remember that story. He wrote about a girl for her to stop being mad on his unemployment. I knew Tom Holland at the time he did that Tsunami movie. We were not really friends, but he was so funny and friendly. It's important not to make Spider-Man masculine, because he's a kid. As soon as you make him masculine, it's harder to relate to him if you are younger and are in high school. I definitely was not masculine in high school. Tom Holland, he is just so pure and almost perfect for the Spider-Man role. My mom dated Will Ferrell for a little while. He came round quite a lot, and she said he was real down to earth and incredibly funny. However, afterwards they really just lost touch. So we never got to know how he personally changed. My mom says she's still like he used to be. My mom and dad still laugh about her dating him. Your mom dated the Gator? I knew Brett and Jermaine, Flight of the Conchords, back in the late 90s/early 2000s, and met Taika Waititi a few times too. I was a big fan of his art at the time. There was one painting of someone in a bathtub that stuck in my head. I knew Brett better than the others because he was in a reggae band with my good friend Barnaby. As far as I can tell, they are all exactly the same. I'm not jealous of anyone in this thread but you. Flight of the Conchords was the ducking greatest. Did Steve tell you that, perchance? Steve. I went to high school with Emma Chamberlain. She was a huge bully in high school and pretty much a brat who thought she could get away with whatever she wanted before she got famous. Her parents were divorced, which led to them both always trying to be her friend and never actually parenting her, so they basically let her do whatever she wanted. When she said that people from her high school made fun of her because she was poor and that the parking lot was all BMWs and Range Rovers, I lost my mind because she was the bully in high school, and while the school definitely had some wealthy students, it was mostly a middle class crowd. Didn't she grow up in the SF Bay Area, particularly the peninsula? BC is a native of the area. Unless you're in a specific area, you're not poor, and it just always rubbed me the wrong way. I went to high school with Daka Montgomery. He was a Rick with a huge ego in high school, and I saw him recently when he came back to his hometown, and seems like has still a Rick with an even bigger ego now. I can't watch Stranger Things without rolling my eyes every time he comes on screen. Well, he was a Rick in Stranger Things too, so he must be committed to his role, I guess. My brother knows the guy that Squidward was based off of. Turns out that made him more bitter cause he was made fun of. The floor creaks, the summers are brutal, and there's a giant man-eating clam in the backyard. The floor creaks, the roof leaks, there's a terrible draft. Please don't interrupt me, I'm not finished. The winters are harsh, the summers are brutal. There's a wild man-eating clam in the backyard. Now would you care to see the rest of my home? Credit to /u/Chocataco3030. Who knows if these are real, but they make for great reading while on the toilet. Morning Chiz crew checking in. Chris Hemsworth and his brother Liam, both really good blokes before and after they became famous. I met Chris Hemsworth when he was only on Home and Away. My wife was a huge fan and we traveled halfway across the world for a holiday and went to the Home and Away set. She got a picture with him. I wasn't bothered. Now I'm telling everyone I met Chris Hemsworth. Wish I got that picture. Damn it. Edit. I will get my redemption one day, Thor, and get that picture with you. My best friend is cousins with Tyler Posey. She said he was a sweetheart before his Teen Wolf days, and he still is now. That makes me so happy. When I was younger I was obsessed with that show, and it's nice to know he's genuinely a great guy. My brother used to play basketball with a bunch of people in high school. Among those who would sometimes join in was Pete Davidson. My brother said he got ripped on a ton and no one really liked him. But that might just be because he wasn't great at basketball. I met him last year while he was out with his friends. I didn't want to say anything till my mom rolled down the window and asked if I could get a picture. We were in the parking lot. He was on FaceTime with someone and he told them that he would call back later, and he took a picture with me. Really nice guy. A co-worker of mine met Daisy Ridley while on a backpacking trip. Got to know each other pretty well while traveling together. She told my co-worker that she wanted to become an actress. Looks like that panned out pretty well. They said Daisy was an absolutely lovely individual. How long ago was this, before Star Wars? My aunt had dinner with Keanu Reeves and other people before he did Matrix when he came to Spain. She said that Keanu was very handsome and incredibly polite. Edit. I know that Keanu was famous before Matrix, but my aunt met him before he filmed Matrix. Also THX for the upvotes. I knew Robert Pattinson about 15 years ago. Nice guy, friendly, a lot of fun to be with. He lived by himself in the center of Soho, London, in a tiny one-bed flat that I think he felt like the romantic vision of a starving artist, or at least wanted to. He had a weird side. He'd say random, violent, depraved things. He was obsessed with Jack Nicholson. He never really gave a duck. He had confidence, and he was always himself, and he knew he could be deliberately contradictory, and he used that as a personality trope. But he was a good guy, and I get the impression he's very comfortable with himself, now that he has developed his career, that he acts very well, and that he can pick and choose his roles based upon what he wants to do, and who he wants to work with. Twilight for him was always a means to an end, and I think he worked it very much to his benefit, and didn't compromise himself. Deleted. I knew Cillian Murphy back in secondary school. We didn't go to the same school but mingled a lot. He was a few years older than me. Dude was super quiet, but really damn friendly. I remember when he was cast in 28 Days Later, and people were pretty hyped for him, but a good few people didn't think much of it. Once it came out though, a lot of people changed their tune when they could see him actually act amazingly. His roles in Sunshine, Peaky Blinders, 28 Days Later, and the Dark Knight trilogy absolutely blew me away. Edit. I just woke up, and wow, I was not expecting this to blow up. Honestly, any role he takes he exceeds expectations. I'll have to check out the other movies he has played a role in. I changed the Dark Knight to the trilogy because his role as Scarecrow was phenomenal in all 3 movies, even though his roles were minor in the last 2 movies. My mum knew Mel B from her high school. Apparently she always copied other people's work. Well, she had to, otherwise she'd be Mel D. Edit. Left what I thought was a throwaway joke comment and came back to all this love. Thanks guys. My aunt went to high school with Obama and apparently he was called Barry. Otherwise he was basically the same. Good old Barry OB. My sister has a friend that's cousins with The Weeknd. From what my sister told me, he doesn't attend large family gatherings as much. Apparently some relatives only want to ask him questions in regards to his fame and whatnot. I'm not sure if that meant they ask him for favors, but it must get annoying either way. It must suck to be around family and not be your regular old self. At the same time, it must be hard for his relatives to see him as the same guy before he got famous. I'm not saying that they shouldn't try, but people are naturally weird and awkward. It's just another chisty part about being famous, and I'm sure he's not the only celebrity that's gone through this. I met The Weeknd before he got super famous. He was already well known, but this was pre 50 Shades of Grey when he was on tour for Kissland. He did a meet and greet. As long as you had his album you could meet him. So we waited in line towards the end of his concert. I was with a friend who to this day is a huge fan. We both are. But she had gone to his show the night before in a different city. They had him set up to meet us behind a curtain with no light, and I'll never forget he said, "I need a lamp or something. It's depressing that I can't see any of my fans," and he recognized my friend right away and said, "Wow, you actually came to both shows." Ugh, good times. My dad was good friends with Johnny Depp back in the day. It was around when he was first filming 21 Jump Street, the show, not the movie lol. My dad says he was really humble and kind and always paid their bar tab. Apparently he was quite generous in giving out lots of free quality cocaine at parties too. Well, this took a turn in the end lol. When my dad was in the army, he and some other army members were invited to the filming set of Saving Private Ryan. They were asked to show the actors how to hold guns and how to act like real soldiers. He told me that he met Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks during his time there. He said that both of them seemed like nice people, but said that Tom Hanks in particular was incredibly down to earth, genuine, and has a great sense of humor. I know this is after he became famous, but it's nice to know fame didn't turn him into something negative. You wouldn't be Irish, would you? Around the time they were filming Saving Private Ryan in Wexford, my uncle was working in a bar there. One day, this big jolly American guy comes in and asks, "Do they serve good stuff here?" My uncle answered cynically and said he would be better off going to another pub. A few hours later, the owner of that pub went and thanked my uncle profusely because it turns out that American guy was Tom Hanks, and my uncle didn't even know. Mom knew Jeff Bezos' sister in high school, never really knew him all that well, but she says he was well known to be a grade A rickhead. Very full of himself and huge god complex, even before he went to Princeton etc. So really not that much different from what I can tell. Jeff Bezos was probably like Dennis Reynolds in high school. I played drums with Mike Portnoy in high school band, and I'm still friends with his sister, and he is still a cool guy. His sister? Courtney Portnoy. I went to middle school with Justin Bieber, even played on the school soccer team together. I always thought he was a rick, really stuck up and self-centered. But for the longest time I legitimately thought his name was Justin Bieber, and I would call him that every time I talked to him, and I always wondered why he got too angry. So maybe he was only a rick to me. Who is Justice Bieber? This is real late and secondhand, but I knew someone who went to ACM with Ed Sheeran. He said he was lazy in class, skipped keys and just wanted to smoke weed, and my acquaintance was mad when Ed started getting more and more famous when Ed didn't even bother with his music courses. I thought that was funny. Didn't he drop out of school at 16 and just play gigs at bars pretending he was 18 and getting paid in booze? I went to high school with Post Malone. We graduated the same year. He always wore a suit to class and was that nerdy dedicated kid. Glad to see how his life turned out. I hope nothing for the best for him, and now I listen to him all the time, haha. Him just a rando to him though. We never really talked. Typo. You knew Pre Malone, damn. I went to high school with Mark Ruffalo. He was nice. He was one of those thespians. Our high school had an acting group that challenged the students to get out of their shell and do things in front of strangers, like introducing yourself as a wild fairy of the woods and presenting them with a flower. We didn't talk much, but like I said, he was a good guy. His son went to school right by where I live and someone I know's brother was one of his teachers. Apparently Mark is still a really down-to-earth, good guy from their interactions at parent-teacher conferences and graduation. My 8th grade science teacher dated Bill Nye. Broke up with him because he didn't like kids. Hold up, my high school biology teacher dated Bill Nye too. Not sure why they didn't work out though. I find it hilarious that at least 2 of his exes became science teachers. This person isn't famous per se, or has always been the same level of famous, but my brother and I went to school with Wes Cage, Nicolas Cage's kid. He would attend class with 1 to 2 bodyguards who looking back I think did double duty as sober companions. He ran circles around them, and my brother became really good friends with him. Some of my favorite stories are as follows. 1. Wes and my brother were at Wes's home, and Nicolas Cage ended up daring Wes and my brother to drink spoiled milk with him. So, I can safely say my brother drank spoiled milk with Wes Cage and Nicolas Cage. 2. They snuck away from the bodyguards and went to hide out in the mini movie theater in the house. That's where Wes's dad kept this very expensive and old whiskey that he'd only open for Christmas. So what did the kids do? Bust open the liquor cabinet and drank it all. I remember my brother coming home drunk as a skunk that day at age 16. 3. Then God, do I wish I had this tape, but my brother, Wes, and some other kid made a video reenacting Romeo and Juliet. They were kissing each other, making horrible jokes, and so forth. And as if that wasn't bad enough, the camera panned to Wes's mom who was dressed in what could only be described as bondage attire. The teacher quickly had turned it off in class because it was so inappropriate. I wish I knew how Wes was doing now. He was in my drama club and really good at acting, but seemed to hate it. My brother ended up dead at age 20 and last I heard he had lost contact with Wes shortly after high school. Edit. Thank you for all your condolences, Reddit. It's coming up on 10 years of him being gone. He'd be 30 this year. It is weird for me to think about and has been on my mind much more frequently lately. Damn, this took a turn at the end. Sorry to hear about your brother. Work in a restaurant about 15 years ago as a manager. Rachel McAdams walked in for an interview. She was still in acting school and serving table to pay for it. She worked at my restaurant over the course of the next 2 summers, serving on our patio. Still friends to this day. She hasn't changed a bit. Still bikes to get groceries. I can't get over how funny she is. I still think Regina George in Mean Girls is one of her best roles. Kesha. Total nerd. 1600 on her sats. Quiet. A bit of a social outcast. Nice, though. You could tell she cared about others and wouldn't ever hurt a flea. My heart breaks for her in her recent situation. I love her music and wish her the best. Nobody ever believes me when I tell this story, but when I was 15, I met Ariana Grande on Facebook. I was into flirting with random people back then. Lol, we talked for a while, shared some jokes and rage comics. After about 2 months of occasional conversations, she made an update on her wall saying that she signed a contract with Nickelodeon, and then I saw her on Victorious. I was dumbstruck when it happened. Of all the interesting things I've learned from this thread, the most interesting is the fact that Ariana Grande used to like rage comics. I met Noah Centineo when he was in Austin and Ally, so that was a little before he started becoming big. I don't know him very well, although he did once babysit me, haha. But I more so know his mom, as she is one of my mom's closest friends. My mom does still see Noah sometimes and says he hasn't really changed, and that he comes to his mom's events sure says something. Still a sweet gentleman. Peas. Khalees Centineo, though, I do know well. She is amazing. I worked as a production assistant on one of his films, and he was super nice to everyone in the crew, even the lowly PAs. I once knew a musician named Neil Cole who was put under a lot of pressure by his record label. He became who you would now know as Neil Diamond. Take your ducking up vote. One of my aunts actually dated Bill Gates for a bit. I believe a few years before things took off for him. She said he was too into her or something like that at the time, and weirded her out, I guess. Sorry about the lack of detail. Bill is a great guy, but he's certainly odd. I once had an opportunity to present some work to him in a 2013 review at Microsoft. What was amazing about him is you could show Bill the product code name, e.g. Blue, which was Windows 10, and he somehow magically be able to tell you the 5-year plan along with how it's going to perform and turn out. Bill was able to think 50 miles ahead of everyone, so it makes a ton of sense that most people might think he's a little odd. The whole F-bomb factor was real. However, he seemed to have chilled a little when we presented in 2013. Jason Momoa used to plow my stepsister. I shook his hand in my living room once. He was not as impressive physically then. I can tell by your verb choice that she is definitely your stepsister. My friend went to high school with James Charles. Apparently he was a total rig bag. Doesn't surprise me, tbh. That dude is really full of himself. Can't wait to listen to these replies on Yao to Reddit. Here we go. Yao 2. In a robotic text-to-speech voice. I went to high school with Mark Hamill. He was in my 5th period government class, and he absolutely loved to get into debates with our teacher, Mr. Hinretti. Mark was always active in many extracurricular activities, including a run for student council. He often wore a suit and tie to school, which caused all the young ladies, and some young men as well, to swoon. He was always upbeat and exuded an air of positivity. It is no surprise to me that he has met with the level of success that he richly deserves. That's a great story. Cute. My father is a long-haul trucker. Knew James Cameron in his 20s when he was a trucker too. Said the guy was always insanely smart and would go out and basically take every engine apart and put it back together, so if you needed your rig fixing and he was around, you'd search him out. They stayed friends, and we actually got to visit him in LA over Christmas once. Now we live in Europe, so don't think they talk much, but he's really smart and intense, although not what I expected him to be like from the stories on his movies. I had an English teacher who went to school W/Kanye West. She claimed he was a lame, which honestly doesn't seem to be a secret, as many rappers are seen as outcast before the come up. But the way in which she said it was as if she was still popular and he was still lame. Lol, decent English teacher I suppose, but possessed none of other qualities a good teacher should have. She actually laughed as someone roasted my hairline. How bad is your hairline? Need a serious tag. I wish serious was the default and comedy was the tag to add if you wanted humorous answers. Although Reddit would still try its hardest to be the funniest guy in the room. I went to the same church as Lil Nas X when we were kids. That church was extremely homophobic and taught all of us to be just as homophobic. I didn't know him that well, but because of what we were taught, I would be shocked if he wasn't homophobic as a kid. It was intense. Fear the type of people who think homosexuality is worse than pedophilia. From what I've seen, he hasn't changed much. His personality seems exactly the same, has just open about his sexuality and more distant from religion. That explains why he hadn't come out beforehand. I guess once he was settled into the big life he felt more in control of his life, and it was probably a lot easier to forget the haters for lack of a better term. Jennifer Lawrence. I moved to Louisville middle of 7th grade year. She was my first friend, and the first person I had a sleepover with. We hit it off. She was very different from me, a cheerleader, came from a lot of wealth, but her family was really awesome and we were both kinda weird and outgoing, so we become good friends very fast. Her family owned a farm that had a children's summer camp, hi ho, and we went to it a couple of times. She had one of her birthday parties there. I remember her kissing our friend John under a trampoline. We talked about it for way too long. We hung out fairly often until she moved to New York City a year and a half after we met. We started taking acting classes together in 8th grade at a local theater here in town, Walden Theater. It's funny because on our first day, we had no idea we were both taking the class. I walked into the first one, and there she was. We were both so excited to have a friend. We were in the first level of the theater, but after a couple weeks, both moved to the intermediate class. We were the oldest people in the class, so that's why they moved us up so fast. We carpooled together to Walden Theater every Tuesday and Thursday for acting class. I would ride the bus home with her, her mom would take us to class, then my mom would pick us up and take her home. She was a natural at acting, I'll tell you that. I was still somewhat shy, but she could pretty much be given any character, and even though she was 14, yeah, I'd believe it. She always talked about how she had a photographic memory, and that's how she was able to remember lines so easily, and she did. It was insane. I have read where she said she's had no prior acting, but this isn't true. I'm not sure if she said this for a part of her look, or maybe she considered it informal, but we definitely took acting classes our entire 8th grade year. I will say, what you see with her is what you get. She was always very quirky, kinda weird, which was funny, because she was so preppy presenting, but really wasn't like that. She was very loud, made her presence known. It's been bizarre seeing her in interviews, because she acts the exact same. I remember she moved to New York City to pursue modeling between 8th and 9th grade. It worked because soon after she was in a commercial for Burger King and a couple of MTV's My Sweet 16 commercials as well. She was doing online classes for our high school, Ballard High School, and came to visit one time in 9th grade and another in 10th grade. I squealed when I saw her. I genuinely missed her. I had no idea she was about to become one of the most famous actresses of our generation. I always hear she comes to town for holidays, but at this point I have no idea how to contact her. She had a private Facebook for a while, assuming it was really her. For a time, I had a few fake accounts for her request to be my Facebook friend, along with a lot of people we went to school with. The last time we spoke was for my 21st day. I'm 29 now, but I would love to catch up with her. I can't help but wonder if she remembers me. I still have her yearbook photo she signed hanging up in my room. Our yearbooks and a couple photos from a disposable camera. I believe your friend John. That kiss Jennifer Lawrence is my stepbrother. Has always liked to that story to us when she started to get big. My host family mom in Dublin told me Bono from U2 was a clumsy waiter at her wedding. The Edge knocked my sister down years ago in Dublin. She was about 7 to 8 and ran out onto the road. She wasn't hurt, and he was so nice. This was pre-U2 fame. Random story that just came into my head there, lol. My dad went to school with Steve Irwin, reckons he was exactly the same as a young fella. He would be away from school all the time on trips with Bob to rescue and rehome crocs all over Australia. No good at footy but 22 years on this planet, and the worst thing I've heard about Steve Irwin is that he's a Chiz footy player. What a gem. My bio teacher was friends with Rainn Wilson, Dwight from The Office. They used to grab coffee often around the time The Office started. From how she described him, Rainn seems like a pretty down-to-earth guy. My parents went to high school with some of the family members from Duck Dynasty, and apparently they were clean-shaven and had a very preppy look to them. When watching the show I just cannot picture them being preppy high schoolers, no matter how hard I try. They Larry the Cable Goo it up. I knew Mike Jones before his record deal. Back then hoes didn't want him. Then he became hot, and they were all on him. Who? My family went to the same health club as Obama before he was president. He was cool. I was a little kid and he swam with his daughters and me. And he played hella basketball. Pretty sure that MF could dunk. President just dunked on you. Not me, but my GCSE music teacher taught Emma Watson when she was about 10/11 years old at school in Oxford. Before Harry Potter stardom, she always said that she was very cliquey, not sure if that's how you spell it, and was very judgmental and made fun of other girls that weren't skinny or as attractive, and ended up being quite a nasty bully to a few particular girls in her class that this teacher had to speak to her about. The teacher said she couldn't believe when Emma came out with all her feminist speeches and charity work, considering how she had been to other girls at school. Kids are idiots and cruel. Maybe it's partly some redemption from what she did as a kid. OFC, there is always some PR. A teacher of mine went to high school with Ryan Reynolds. He didn't talk much about their relationship in class, but about 2 years ago, this teacher was among the 50 people Ryan Reynolds followed on Instagram. I know, Instagram bad, so I assume that they are still good friends. Chris Pratt grew up and went to school about 10 to 15 minutes away from me. I've heard countless stories of him pulling his Rick out on the bus, and known people who made out with him back in the day. He was a real goober from the few people I've heard talk about him. Though like many in my area, he definitely leans toward the ultra-conservative side and puts on quite a bit of a Hollywood act. He pulled his Rick out for a scene in Parks and Recreation. How on brand, apparently. My aunt used to work with Gordon Ramsay's mother, but never made the connection. Once they were out for lunch and he ended up coming in to see his mum and met my aunt in the process. She said he was so lovely and polite. Plus my dad has a bunch of Gordon's old jumpers he didn't want anymore. Not signed or anything like that. It's just a fun family story now. That is a very specific story. So incredibly specific that I'm going to choose to believe it. Because who the hell would make up your father owning Gordon Ramsay's clothing? Oh my. You watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.